Hello. This is a pre-recording of a presentation scheduled for April 13th through the Verona Public Library. The April 13th presentation will be live virtual to allow for questions from the audience. This pre-recording is to be made available for those that can't attend during the day and time that the presentation is scheduled. My name is Marty Cieslik. I'm a construction manager for the City of Verona Public Works Department, and I'm going to be presenting on the construction of the Lincoln Street Stormwater Basin that is currently underway. This is a repeat of a program that was done in December of 2020 with some updated information. So without further ado, I'm going to switch to the screen and move to the PowerPoint presentation. So right now, you should be seeing the title slide of the presentation called the Lincoln Street Basin. The plan for this evening is to review the big picture of stormwater management in the United States, how Verona fits into that just very briefly, then talk about why this basin is being constructed, how long the permitting process and the planning process has been for this project, some of the unusual features, a little bit on the Dane County water quality grant that we received to help this construction. We'll talk about upstream activities scheduled in conjunction with this project. And finally, hit you up on some reminders on how citizens can help us manage stormwater in the city of Verona, and in particular, try to keep stormwater cleaner. So our big picture always involves the fact that we are part of the national watershed. We're in the Mississippi River watershed, and all of that water drains down to the Gulf of Mexico. Here's a map showing the Mississippi River watershed, and notice that it covers a wide chunk of the United States. I like to say somewhere between a half and 2/3 of the country. You'll notice at the bottom, there's this area called the hypoxic dead zone. That's an area where the discharge water from the Mississippi River flows into the Gulf of Mexico, and an area in the Gulf becomes so laden with nutrients running off from the land and pollutants that are coming down the rivers that the oxygen is consumed, and basically no fish or life that is based on oxygen can survive in that area. And this is a seasonal phenomenon, and it's been going on for a number of years. I personally know it goes back all the way to 1996 when I first learned about it. Verona sits in the upper Mississippi River watershed. Our water actually drains south of across the state line into the Rock River, and then ultimately across into the Mississippi River. So our water comes out and joins the Mississippi just below the Illinois-Wisconsin state line, where the Rock River flows into the Mississippi. So please keep that in mind that this is really the driving reasoning for all the work that we do with stormwater management. Now I'd like to move on to just talking about the specifics of the Lincoln Street Basin. The original idea came from a 2000 stormwater management plan, and that's where the location was identified. Here's a cover from the report that generated the idea. Note the date, July 2000. And in here, if you want to pause and read through this paragraph describes why the location was selected. It happens to be in an area where there is not a lot of treatment. There's the core of the city that was built well before stormwater treatment was something that was thought about as a need for managing stormwater. The Lincoln Street Basin is going to be located behind City Hall, located off of Lincoln Street. And this drainage way that is south of City Hall is, we call it the Lincoln Street Channel. So this, where the circle is where we're going to be doing that building. You'll notice that there is a stormwater basin that was built for City Hall that will be incorporated into this new basin. Again, why this location? It's treating a part of the city that does not have a lot of stormwater treatment in place. This map shows the watersheds that contribute into it, and there is some different shading. Focus on the purple shading. This is the area that is the older part of the city that was built without any stormwater management specifically included with the original construction. So a lot of this water will now be coming and collected and be run through the Lincoln Street Basin. These other areas, the orange and the blue, have some treatment and some stormwater facilities up in them, but they discharge and actually end up going and will be part of the flow that runs through the Lincoln Street Basin. The key ones are the Silent Street Pond across from the public library and the Prairie Oaks Pond behind Pasquale's, if you will, off of Cross Country Road, roughly at the intersection of Enterprise and Cross Country. So quite a large area, and these factors, these other upstream stormwater facilities make the engineering and the analysis of this, the treatment of this, that this basin will provide a more complex problem. We'll get into the features of the plan, and then we'll come back to what we're doing upstream. The unusual features for the plan are the fact that water will be diverted in the channel and sent into the basin. And the idea is to treat the lower flows, not the higher flows. There's a permitting challenge because of that diversion, and then several engineering challenges that I'll review. I'll run through a couple of plan sheets from the construction drawings just to give you an idea. Please just focus on the shapes. Don't try to get too hung up on the details. Here is City Hall and the police station. Lincoln Street is on the left. The channel runs under Lincoln Street, and here's where the dam will be built, and the water will be diverted into this wet basin. You can maybe make out the existing stormwater basin for City Hall right here. So this portion of the basin will be wet, and then this area to the northeast, and it's a horseshoe-shaped area, will be an infiltration area. So the idea is that water will flow into this area and then seep into the ground through, and by going through the ground, it will be cooled, and then it will be discharged out. Under very high flow conditions, water would be running out over a weir area that would allow it to discharge. So if we have a 2018 storm, I suspect that a large part of this will be underwater. So that's the general operation of the basin. Interesting features. We had actually two design engineering firms on it. One firm worked on this purple area, which is considered a dam. And then the other firm worked on this green area, which is really the stormwater treatment part of it. The two engineering firms seem to have worked very well together. We're pleased with the work that they put together. This is a couple of cross-sectional views of the project. This area, this upper cross-section shows the construction of the dam. It will have a clay core There will be some concrete facing in the green areas, and then there will be some topsoil area. So so flow will be coming from the left and diverted, if you will, into the page, into the stormwater pond. And then this lower cross section shows the clay liner that is going to be built for the pond, which also has to include an under drain system to manage groundwater that comes into it. So this is where the more complex engineering comes into play, just to give you a bit of a feel for what that looks like. I had mentioned earlier the permitting challenge, which was really the idea of diverting water through a stormwater pond on an existing waterway. And it took years and some efforts to convince people that this was a good idea and move it along so that we could get to a design process. The engineering challenges, again, I mentioned that modeling that complex watershed system that is upstream of the basin, building a dam is always an engineering challenge in terms of how that needs to be done, considering groundwater conditions and so forth. Managing the groundwater is an issue. We'll have to build that under drain system, and then we will have to build a liner system so that we are not, we're managing the water and not contaminating groundwater with stormwater. Again, here's a different cross section, and this is just, I put this in just to show you a little bit of what the under drain system is. That's that drainage to control groundwater that wants to come up through the liner system. So there will be a plastic layer, it's called a geonet, that will be laid underneath the clay, and then there will be periodic trench areas with pipes that will conduct that water away from the liner to keep the pressure off of that clay. Here's a general cross-sectional view. On the right, you see the dam structure. To the left of that is the wet pond, and then the large area that's cut out is the infiltration area. We've actually started construction. We started on April 7th. The construction erosion control silt fence has been installed, and the construction fencing separating off the site is in progress as I do this presentation. We expect substantial completion by the middle of September, and you'll have access there, or the project access will be off of Lincoln Street. So you'll see some orange barrels located just south of the channel and City Hall, and a gravel road being constructed there. We were fortunate that this project received a grant from Dane County. It's their groundwater quality grant. It's a very substantial grant. Here's the announcement on that. If you want to read it, stop and read it more carefully. That was announced back in October of 2020. And here's the citation of the grant award. So the city is getting $500,000 for this construction, and the overall project cost is about a little over $2 million. So about a quarter of the cost is covered by grant, which is a nice bit of help on the financial side. I want to talk a little bit about some of the upstream activities that the city is doing in conjunction with this project coming online. So we've had some work done at the Silent Street Pond. We cleaned that out in December of 2018, so removed a sediment that had been built up over the years. And we're planning to do a treatment of that pond this coming May. There's a basin called the Harmony Hills Basin that we cleaned out last fall, and there's a big wet basin we call it the Prairie Oaks Basin, that we're planning to clean out in 2022. We've done some preliminary work on that with sediment sampling in 2020, water sampling in 2020, and continuing into 2021 to understand what the water quality is and how our efforts will uh, change that water quality after the maintenance activities have been completed. We've done an estimate on the Prairie Oaks sediment. Um, there's about 7/10 thick layer. It varies from place to place. We did that through the ice over uh, back in February. The Gateway Pond is a natural kettle pond that doesn't have a natural outlet, but we sometimes pump that one into Prairie Oaks. So we've done some water quality monitoring in 2020, and then there is a basin that leads into the Gateway Pond that we did a prairie burn and are scheduling some more minor maintenance later uh, this spring and summer uh, to help manage that. So to give you an idea of where these upstream structures are, again, down in the lower right is where the Lincoln Street Basin is. We're going back upstream. Here's the Lincoln Street Channel behind City Hall, again in the lower right. The red arrows are pointing where the stormwater pipes flow. We have two sets of pipes in the uh, Jefferson and Gilman uh, area. Silent Street Pond. Here's the library about the middle right side of the aerial photo. Stormwater piping coming from the Prairie Oaks Pond. This Prairie Oaks Pond is our second largest by area in the city of Verona, about 5.5 or so acres, so a very good sized pond built in about the early 2000s. The Harmony Hills Basin is a dry basin. This is the one that we cleaned out in November of 2020. And then here is Gateway Pond, which we have a pumping system if this water gets too high that it would threaten the houses that were built around there. And that water then runs through Prairie Oaks Pond, ultimately makes its way through Silent Street, and will end up going downstream to the Lincoln Street Channel. The Gateway Pond, which I hadn't um, labeled on this drawing, is located off of Cohiba Court to the west of the Gateway Pond. And that acts as a bit of a forebay, if you will, to the water that flows into the Gateway Pond. That's runoff water from the streets. So that's where those locations are. And these are areas where we're working to get these facilities in the best shape possible so that we're giving uh, the longest life possible on the new Lincoln Street Channel. And again, just to reiterate the areas that we're talking about. So Silent Street Pond across from the library, Prairie Oaks, these are the blue and the orange areas that have those existing facilities that make modeling our, our water quality treatment efforts more challenging. This large purple area is the area where we have essentially very little stormwater treatment in place. So now I'd just like to end my presentation with a few reminders and some information that you may or may not find useful relative to managing stormwater. Um, I'd just like to ask you to be a water conscious person. We have install a rain barrel, install a rain garden, keep your trash out of the streets. Uh, we have a bit of a contradictory leaf collection policy. I'll talk about that in a minute. One thing I'd like to ask you to consider is adjusting your water softener. Typically in the Madison, Dane County area, water softeners are set to treat at about every 800 gallons. If you move that to treat at every 900 gallons, you'll reduce the amount of salt that is added to our wastewater system. So this is a request not really on stormwater, but from our wastewater utility, and in particular, the Madison Metropolitan Sewerage District, because chloride is becoming a problem we are getting more elevated chlorides in our water, and chloride is a conservative uh, constituent of water that you just can't, it doesn't go away. So the less salt we put into it, the better off we are. Along with those lines, in the wintertime, if you'd be judicious about using salt on your sidewalks and driveways. And then finally, consider joining or becoming a member of the USRWA, which stands for Upper Sugar River Watershed Association. That organization runs a number of volunteer opportunities that are just really good for people to get hands-on experience, from water quality monitoring to uh, prairie restoration activities in the watershed. The city of Verona is a municipal member, and uh, our efforts to encourage you to use those uh, volunteer opportunities through USRWA is part of our stormwater management and participation program. So please consider that. Google USRWA to get to the website. Uh, a very good organization. I'd like to remind you about the Rain Barrel and Rain Garden Rebate Program. For brevity, I am not going to take you to the website, but if you go to the city website and in the search box, put in Rain Barrel or Rain Garden, it will take you to the links for filling out a form to complete that. Putting in a rain barrel is relatively simple, and requesting the rebate is also very simple. You just do it online. I will get that information. Typically, once I receive that submittal, I'll email you back that I've received it. I'll go out, take a photograph of your rain barrel, and submit the rebate request. Our uh, native plant rebate program for rain garden plantings is a little bit more complex in that it requires you to provide a receipt showing that you did in fact purchase uh, native plants to install in your rain garden. And the other thing that we're looking for when you apply for this rebate is in fact that the plants are intercepting stormwater in some fashion or runoff water from your property. Uh, but that this is a very generous rebate program. We will rebate up to 50% of the cost of your native plants, up to a total rebate of $150. So, with a little bit of pre-planning and taking advantage of some of the group sales, you can get your native plants uh, at a relatively good cost when you consider that. The other thing that the city offers along with the native plant rebate program is a service where we will provide you with a contour map of your property, and that requesting that map can be done through the rain garden rebate program. There's a box that you'll check to complete that. Again, go to the city website to check that out. I'd like to remind you about the city's yard waste and brush program. Again, I've added this into my programming just to keep getting the word out on what the city does. So, in general, the city does not collect yard waste. We collect brush, and that's those larger items, that a tree limb that came down that you need to have cut up. We will come around during the growing season, approximately once every 2 weeks. We'll go through the city and collect brush and get those larger things out. Your yard waste can be brought down to the city public works office at 410 Investment Court during the summer from April through October, and sometimes extending into November. We run extended hours on Monday evenings, and we run Saturday hours. So there's opportunity to bring your yard waste down. If you also consider managing your yard waste, especially those grass clippings, by using a mulching mower, or consider composting those things. Again, you can find those uh, our leaf and curbside management uh, policies on the city website. There are those locations. Um, During the fall, Verona is a bit unusual in that we ask that people pile their leaves in the curb. Um, the difference between the city of Verona and many other communities is the fact that we come around during the leaf fall season from, say, mid-October through middle to end of November. Once a week, we're getting around the city, whereas in many other communities, they only come around once, and that's why they ask you to pile the leaves in the terrace. And we ask that you put it in the curb because of the methods of how we collect those leaves. So city does not pick up yard waste. It does pick up brush, and it does pick up leaves in the fall. Go to the website, check out uh, those policies if you have any questions. Um, I'd like to just remind you of some upcoming programming. In particular, on April 26th, there is a program on the pond treatment activities that we will be doing coming up in about mid-May. And then we'll be renewing and continuing this series of uh, stormwater education programs again in the fall. We've got a couple of programs in mind. We haven't set dates yet, but we'll be updating the residents on what our plans are for 2022. There is a plan that is being worked on, a concept that's being developed for some restoration of a piece of the Sugar River out front of Epic. That would be, I think, will be very interesting. There are some efforts in the works to do some restoration beyond the sewer project that's happening right now along the Badger Mill Creek. And then certainly I mentioned the clean out of the Prairie Oaks Basin. So we'll be having presentations on those coming up in the fall. With that, I'd like to thank you for listening in, and I hope you have a great evening, and uh, help us out with where you can, keeping the trash out of the streets. We really appreciate your help. Thank you.